It's time for Voice of Indie. Your hosts today are Beam Weeks, author, producer, and marketing monster for independent multimedia publisher Fresh Ink Group, and Stephen Gies, author, producer, composer, and publisher for Fresh Ink Group.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Voice of Indie podcast, show number 57. I am your host, Beam Weeks, and with me, as usual, is my co-host, Stephen Gies. How you doing tonight, Stephen?
I'm just fine and dandy. How are you doing?
I'm just dandy and fine. See how I did that?
Yeah, it's been a pretty good week. We had the remnants of the hurricane came through, dump a whole lot of water, and then move on. And now it's beautiful outside and in the 70s, so I'm going to enjoy this evening when we get off the air.
All right.
Hello Chattanooga went into pre-sale this week. It's going to be released officially in a couple of weeks. That's the book by newscaster, journalist, radio personality, Chattanooga denizen David Carroll. And it's a 710-page book, beautiful book, full of color pictures. We're just having all kinds of fun with it. David went out there and did some public appearances and sold out of his first shipment already and has already ordered $13,000 worth of additional copies for him to take to events. So we had to spend some time on the phone today making arrangements for an 18-wheeler full of books to get into his neighborhood. And had to arrange a hand cart in order to get him up his driveway and all that. So, we like to complain about selling so darn many books. We got to order a hand truck in order to get them from one place to another.
Yeah. Well, that's a good thing to be able to brag about. I wanted to say a quick little thing. One of our regular listeners, Verwayne Greenhow, he's not going to be in the audience again this week. His wife has been having some medical issues, and she's taken kind of a wrong turn. So he's up at the hospital with her, and just want everybody to, keep him in your thoughts and in your prayers. And we hope to have him back in the audience, both him and Lisa, pretty soon. So
hang in there, Verwayne and Lisa. We need you back in the audience soon.
All right.
We've been kind of curious, listeners, about, if any of you out there are actually paying attention to the show. And we do notice the numbers that come up on Blog Talk Radio, which is our primary host here. And we see the numbers, going up each week, a little bit more respectable each time. And, we're kind of pleased with how it's going. Well, in the last couple of days, we got a little bit more serious about the analytics and went looking to see what kind of listenership we're getting through the website, podcast tabs, and Spotify and places like that, and started coming up with some interesting numbers. What did you finding out there, Beam?
Well, the interesting thing is most people, when they listen in the archive, they're actually listening through the freshinkgroup.com website. We've got an audio player, video player. Even though the videos are posted on YouTube, when you watch them on the site, it doesn't register on YouTube. It registers through our video audio player on freshinkgroup.com. And then second, it's Blog Talk Radio, people going back to Blog Talk Radio and listening to the old episodes there as well. But that also combines the live listens. And then finally, YouTube, that's the third most popular out of the three. Now, StephenGees.com has the audio player as well, I believe. But we don't have a way to find those numbers out yet. I think that has to be coded in there to find those numbers. But some interesting things. You would think, okay, we had Mark Herndon and his lovely wife, Leah Seawright, on. Now, Mark he's a known name. He's probably the biggest name that we've had on here, having played drums for Country Music Hall of Fame band Alabama for 28 years. His listens they're at 112 right now. 112. Now, this is, a few weeks after he's been on the show, and they go up each week. All of these go up each week. But just letting other authors know when they come on, you may not be that big a name, but you're still going to get listens. Dick Farrer Jr., he wrote a book about the construction company that his father and two other guys started, and he's got 317 listens to his show, to his episode.
That's pretty good.
Now Robert Willis Croft, he's been on. He's a 2-time guest. His first episode that he was on, that's currently sitting at 379 listens. And his most recent one, a few weeks back, 89. And like I said, each of these go up, as the weeks go on. Ron Yates, he was one of our earliest guests. I think he was on show number 3, if I'm remembering correctly. And he's currently sitting at 507 listens. Another 2-time guest, the father and son rock band, Wide Track. Their first appearance is currently sitting at 414 listens, and their second one at 250. So they were quite popular. And then Verwayne Greenhoe, we had him on some time ago, and he's sitting at 364 listens. Now, we have some that are getting close to 1,000 listens, and we have some that are just getting started with 20 listens. We have some that are in like 800. I think 858 is the most listens. And I just went through and grabbed some of these numbers just to let other people know, hey, if you're a guest on this show, you don't have to be that big name. You're still going to get some numbers. Now, I have no way to figure out what our totals are on Spotify. I've been trying to find where I can count those listens, but I may have to pay for one of those upgraded accounts to be able to see who's listening, or at least how many people are listening over there. But I know we're getting listens over there because I hear from people saying, yeah, they listen on Spotify. But so I mean, total we've got over 12,000 listens just on the freshinkgroup.com site for all of the guests. And listen, we're trying to build this. Next year it would be nice to say, hey, we've got 100,000 listens. And you as listeners, if you enjoyed the show, spread the word, share the link, get this out on social media, invite people in to listen on Wednesday nights, and let's grow this thing and make it big.
It's our marketing social media guy, our 17-year-old Sam. He's out there actively promoting these old shows every week, too. He's posting them. He's putting out those placards, listen to a classic show. He's putting them in the newsletter each week and looking for places to keep getting it out there. We're also noticing that if you Google an author's name, and it's somebody who has been on our show is popping up on that first page in almost all cases, which is a really good sign. That means Google's starting to recognize interest in the show and the amount of traffic that it's getting, too. So it's a building process. If you come on the show and you're a guest, we might only get you 100 listeners while you're actually on the show, but over time we're shooting for 100,000. And it's going to take some time and some effort, and a lot of effort and a little bit of money and expense and whatnot. But again, we're trying to build a library here, not just of live shows, but of archived shows that people will go back and listen to for years to come.
Yeah, and I think the thing that when I was kind of combing through all these numbers, the thing that really surprised me was that the freshinkgroup.com site is the main source that people are going to for the older episodes, because, as you said, Sam is out there promoting those old episodes, but he's usually promoting them on YouTube, trying to build the YouTube channel, and yet most people are still kind of navigating over to the website. So that's kind of cool. If we can get all of them up to that same level, we'll be rocking and rolling.
Yeah, the nice thing about the website is if you click on that podcast tab, that's all that's there is our podcast. If you go to the YouTube channel, it's, our trailers, our audio books, all that stuff's all mixed into one big old pot. So you got to kind of look through the stuff to find all the different podcasts or the particular author you want. But those podcast tabs sure make it easy, and that's all that's there, and they're in order, ready to go with a picture of the person who's the guest. So get on over there. Help us with those numbers.
All right.
Now, we've got an author for you this week. I know. You're kind of weird for us to have an author on the show, but yeah, his name is Michael Lyons. He's a good guy. I've known him for about 6 years now, I think, and I think Beam's known him for a few years longer than that. But we've got a bio, and Beam's about to read it for you.
All right. Michael Lyons is an award-winning author of the Blood series, which so far has won the new Apply Literary Indie Bragg Medallion, readers' favorite for fantasy, and most recently, the Ian Book of the Year selection for fantasy. Mr. Lyons was awarded a BSEE degree in electrical engineering from Stevens Institute of Technology and currently works as an embedded software engineer. He has 4 sons, has been married for more than 30 years, and currently lives with his wife and youngest son in the beautiful, secluded hills of Sussex County, New Jersey. And with that, welcome to the show, Michael. It's good to have you here.
Well, thank you very much, Beam, and thank you very much, Stephen.
Hey,
it's good to be here.
Yeah,
now,
good to have you.
You live in New Jersey now. Is this where you're originally from?
Yes, yeah, I'm a New Jersey native. I'm a lifer.
Oh, right, kind of a Bruce Springsteen kind of
born
guy?
in Madison, New Jersey, and now I live in Sussex County, New Jersey.
Okay, yeah. We usually, when I think of New Jersey, I think of Bruce Springsteen or Bon Jovi,
or Chris Christie.
Yeah.
Or Chris
Christie. Yeah. There you go. As we like to call him, Krispy Kreme Christie. Or Atlantic City. Well, that's a nickname. But actually, the funny thing is, my sister lives in the same town as John Bon Jovi used to live in. That was Rumson, and now I think he moved out and she moved out. But yeah, there's quite a few famous folks and mobsters that come from Jersey. More mobsters, I think.
So what kind of kid were you, Michael? Were you a reader and a writer, or you get out there and be involved in activities and didn't discover the written word till later, or where can we start putting the blame?
I was a big reader. I have to blame my mom because she was an English major. My dad was an engineer, and my mom was an English major. And I kind of went, if you will, both ways. I was always a good, always really interested in books and in reading, and I had all my favorite genres. I loved Tolkien and fantasy. I loved Holmes and Agatha Christie and the Hardy Boys and all those other, all the youthful books. I have a huge. I'm sitting in the middle of my part of my huge collection of paperbacks. They're just like falling all around the room here in the office. And so was a big reader before I ever wrote a word. But I always did enjoy writing. And the first time I ever started to write, I felt very confident and comfortable, putting my thoughts down on paper. Part of becoming a good writer is to ingest and sort of absorb good writing from other good authors and people that you enjoy. And I think you find that it gives you something to pattern yourself after. You're certainly not copying them, but you're patterning yourself after your author heroes, if you will.
Well, yeah, you're not going to sit down to write a book having never, write a novel having never read a novel. Or, like a filmmaker's not going to decide to make a film though they've never watched a movie before. You're influenced by it.
You say that, but I've read some people who would appear that's what they did.
Yeah, I've got a Kindle full of stuff like that.
Yes, so I mean that's very charitable, but it's not the truth. There's quite a few people who seem to engage in this activity without having first done a little reading.
Yeah, I think
or comprehending.
Total agreement. I think as writers, you read and you're influenced by. I've got influences from all kinds of people. From Stephen Gees to Barbara Kingsolver to Stephen King, there's just something that they've written that a certain way that they write it that hey I like that and I maybe weave that into a short story or something here and there. Not like you said, not taking what they wrote, but just the way they write something, the way they construct a sentence or something or dialogue or whatever.
Oh, yeah, dialogue, exactly. You find somebody who writes good dialogue and you just, you go to school on them, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you received an electrical engineering degree from Stevens Institute of Technology. What about earlier school? Elementary, junior high, high school? Were you writing?
I went to all those, yeah.
Were you writing back then?
Even in Jersey, wow.
Even in Jersey, we have schools. Well, certainly, in school we did writing assignments and that sort of thing. I wouldn't say though I was writing anything for publication, but I did have a Catholic school education, which means there was nuns and discipline and a lot of rules. But I will credit them for instilling the grammar and instilling proper use of the language and a good vocabulary. One thing you'll also get from doing a lot of reading is you'll get a big vocabulary, and it's incredibly important if you're trying to express something which requires a little fine touch or a little subtlety, to have enough words in command and that you know what they mean and how to use them to kind of get your thoughts across. Because the written word is a terrible medium. You got nothing. You got no pictures. You got no sound. You got to do everything on the page and put it in the other person's imagination. And that's a task, as we all know. That's
the challenge. Yeah, it's that. You talk about having a big vocabulary from reading. You have to paint pictures with these words, and the good ones can do it.
It is very difficult, and I think that you do this a lot, Beam, and I know, I'm not sure if you do, Stephen, as well. Write the short story, the short form, and that's I think a higher art because it's harder to do. Okay,
there's a comment here on Twitter from Robert Willis Croft. He says, "My sympathies for having been in New Jersey all your life. I lived there for a year myself a long time ago."
Well, and we were speaking a little bit before the show amongst ourselves, but I'll say that Jersey, we get a bad rap because of New York and because of Trenton and all and the cities. And that's true. None of that away from Jersey. It's all true. And the corridor of I-95 is a terrible place to be. But where we are, where I live, is the rural part of New Jersey, and it's cow country and farms and truck farms and vegetables. And we're just coming into harvest right now. So where we live is much more like much more country than it is anywhere if you get close to the city.
All right.
I think it's time to play a commercial, Beam.
All righty.
Hello, Chattanooga.
Hello, Chattanooga. Famous people who have visited the Tennessee Valley. Features photos, stories, and complete listings of the entertainers, athletes, political leaders, and others who visited the area since 1900. Chattanooga has attracted some of the best-known celebrities in the world, thanks to our city's historic venues, beautiful scenery, and powerful people. Hello, Chattanooga features hundreds of restored photos, behind-the-scenes stories, and thousands of fully indexed entries spanning more than 700 pages. I'm David Carroll. I've worked in Chattanooga television and radio for more than 40 years. I also write a weekly newspaper column and have written 2 other books, Chattanooga Radio and Television, a photo history of Chattanooga media, and Volunteer Bama Dog, a TV guy's love letter to the South, a collection of my most popular stories. Hello, Chattanooga is proudly published by Fresh Ink Group in a keepsake jacketed hardcover edition with full-color interior printing, softcover with black and white photos, and all-color ebook formats worldwide. Take a trip back in time, enjoy great memories, and maybe even settle an argument as you learn the dates and places that your favorite star, athlete, or president visited the Chattanooga area.
All right, cool. You want to catch that episode that David Carroll was on? It's in the archive.
Now, I lost Twitter a little bit ago, Beam, so if anything's happening over there, you need to stay on it. Every time I go back to it, it's just spinning and saying site not available. I don't know why that is.
Oh, my goodness.
I've got it.
Okay.
Well, there's a man, David Carroll, who has quite a nice voice.
Yeah, he does that for a living.
He does that for a living. You can tell he does that for a living. He sounds good.
Yeah, he's got those golden pipes.
He's got the golden pipes, which I wish I had, and then I'd have a different career.
So tell us about your family, Michael. You're married?
I am married. Margaret and I met actually at Stevens Institute of Technology. She was also pursuing a technology degree. She was more in biomedical engineering, and I was in more electrical, if you will. And we got married right out of college. We had our first son a year later, and we never looked back. And we've been married. It was 1983, so it was a while ago. And we came and moved up here to the same house we're in now today in 85. So we've been up here quite a long time. And now all the kids have, they're all off and doing their own thing. So we're empty nesters, if you will.
So you were electrical engineering and she was bioengineering. So you team up.
Biomedical, yes.
Did you team up and build a cyborg?
No. Oh, no.
See, that would have been a cool story.
That would have been a cool story.
We built the cyborg and it got loose.
Did you just violate your NDA, Beam?
There you go. Don't do that. I really do enjoy science fiction, and that's some of my real muse, if you will. So I've written quite a few short science fiction stories, and people keep asking me to write a longer one, and I plan to. But right now, I've been the current story I'm working on, which we'll get to later. But the current story I'm working on is a command performance, if you will, from the mom I mentioned earlier, who was the English major who got me started in all this. So,
all right. Now, when you're not writing, just kind of hanging out, do you have any hobbies or interests? How do you spend your time?
Sure. My oldest son, actually lives fairly close to us, within 5 or 6 miles, and so we do a lot of working on cars together. He very recently, we keep all of our cars going, and we have a collection of Volkswagens and Audis and that sort of thing. But he just, this is an anecdote, if you will, he just bought a Porsche from 2001 that needs a lot of work. So we're going to be doing a lot of that. And, I do enjoy, doing things around the house. I spent almost all last winter preparing my house to be sided, and I'm having somebody do the actual, finished work. But I did all that work. So I do a lot of carpentry. I do a lot of, cooking. I love to cook. I love to bake things. So I keep myself busy. And, of course, we have the 3 grandchildren, so they keep us busy, too.
Now, I noticed something there with the automobiles, Volkswagen, Audi, and Porsche. These are all German.
Yep.
Is that by design? Is this what you specialize in, working on German automotive?
Well, we have all the tools for them, so I think you wouldn't be wrong because my son started with the Volkswagens, and then he says, well, we have all the tools for them now, so we do kind of try to stay in a family of cars, if you will, because every manufacturer has their own idiosyncrasy, so we probably understand those the best, but we'll fix anything.
Okay.
He's an engineer too, my oldest son. He also went to Stevens.
Okay.
So what's your dream car?
Oh gosh, I like Italian cars. I would buy, one of these new Alfa Romeos. They look terrific. But I don't know if I can convince my son that we can fix an Italian car. I had a lot of Italian cars when I was younger. The first car I ever bought was a Lancia Beta Coupe, which was basically a glorified Fiat. And then I had an Alfa Romeo GTV6. Well, these were all very, very old cars. And we had a Saab, and we've always had all kinds of cars to work on. But I do like the Italian cars. They're fun.
Now, I did pull up Twitter on my phone, since I can't get to anything else through this computer here. None of the websites are accessible right now, although Blog Talk Radio is working. Robert Willis Croft says, for what it's worth, down the road from me in New Jersey was a junkyard. On one side was a sign, we buy junk. On the other side was a sign, we sell antiques.
There you go. Well, that's just good marketing now, isn't it, Stephen?
Oh, yeah.
We buy junk and we sell antiques. I could subscribe to that.
Okay, Michael, so Go ahead, Stephen.
I was going to say, you want to play another commercial and then hassle Michael some more?
Sure, all right.
This one is your choice, ABCs or Legacy?
Let's do Legacy of Danger. That's the new one.
Okay, then this, listeners, is the worldwide, in fact, in the entire solar system, premiere of a new promo for Patricia A. Guthrie's Legacy of Danger, which Fresh Ink Group is republishing in the next week or two.
Elena Dacani inherits her family's castle in Romania, a land dipped in myths, folklore, and the legendary Walking Dead. The local proverb serves as a warning. Do not speak badly of the devil, because you cannot know to whom you will belong. When she's attacked by an international assassin, only her deceased husband and her ex-boyfriend's live presence can protect her on her journey to the mountainous region of Transylvania. But that's not the only problem troubling Elena. Who is that boy invading her dreams? And what really happened to a priceless gem-crusted silver cross buried by an earthquake in the 15th century? Who's stalking Elena? Who wants her dead and why? Legacy of Danger by Patricia A. Guthrie is a paranormal romantic thriller with a deep mystery and plenty of suspense. It'll haunt you in jacketed hardcover, softcover, and all ebook formats worldwide. Legacy of Danger by Patricia A. Guthrie is proudly published by Fresh Ink Group.
All right. Yeah, that's a good one. That has a little of everything in it. There's some romance, there's some paranormal, there's some thriller and mystery, and just a lot of really cool stuff. Good story.
And for those of you who subscribe to the newsletter, the form on the home page at freshinkgroup.com, by about next week's newsletter, you should be able to see the video that accompanies that commercial.
Yeah. So, Michael, what I was leaning towards before the commercial was, how long have you been writing? When did you get serious about writing?
Well, that would be
where you thought
2015. Well, that would be in about 20. Let's say, probably about 2010. Actually, and it was on the occasion of, it was one of the anniversary occasions of the passing of my son Christopher, who died when he was 7, and he had suffered from leukemia, childhood leukemia, and I got, I'll say, a task from him. He wanted me to basically write a memoir. And I was going to get it together and have it published basically on the 20th anniversary of his passing, which was he passed in 1994. So that was the beginning of this journey, and it took a long time to write that. And maybe you guys have the same sort of experience. The very first time you go to write a book, in this case a memoir, it takes a long time because you have to kind of feel your way forward and do a lot of reading and rereading. So that was almost a 5-year effort where long periods of time would go where I just would put it to the side,
Yeah.
But then you get.
Like you said, I think that's the case with a lot of writers. Jazz Baby, from start to finish, from beginning to publication, was literally 8 years. But there were a couple of years where it just sat, in a drawer and I didn't touch it. So that was my first. But now they become easier as you go along.
They do, and that's my experience as well. Is that you also kind of learn the ropes, if you will, both your own. You come into your own writing style, and this particular subject was difficult. It was cathartic. It was I wanted to do Christopher justice, and I wanted to tell his story in his. This would be a narrative nonfiction. It was certainly nonfiction, but it was written in the form of a true narrative, a true story, and so it spans, really from his birth to his passing. But it's as a story, it talks about significant interludes. It's not a diary. for argument's sake, which a lot of memoirs, unfortunately or fortunately, perhaps it just depends if you like them or not, is they become sort of a day by day, blow by blow. Then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. And I didn't want to write a book like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting. You chose them, to write a memoir about your son. I know I was seeing an interview with Anne Rice years ago, and she was talking about, she had lost her daughter at 6 to leukemia. And the character in her first novel, Interview with the Vampire, Claudia, she said that was her daughter. That was her way of keeping her daughter alive. Even though it was a vampire story, but to her, she said that's what she said. It was a cathartic healing process for her.
Yeah, and that's another way of bringing people, into your writing that or you like to honor, and you don't necessarily have to say, well, this is about so and so. You just know it yourself. You know who you're writing about.
Yeah. Stephen, you there?
Yeah, I've just verified my internet is completely down, and I cannot figure out how Blog Talk Radio is working when absolutely nothing else will with any of my 3 computers. My phone is disconnected from the internet now, but I'm still on the air. So hey,
wow.
Everybody,
you're doing great so far. Don't curse it.
Yeah, I'm the magic person here. So Michael, I mean, what is your process like? I mean, do you write every day or only when you feel like it? Do you have certain times of the day, certain place that you like to work, burn incense, chant? How do you work?
Well, no incense, no chance, but I do like to write every day. I find that habit works for me, and it can be as little as a couple hundred words, and I think over time, and I think you guys will say the same, is you get into a rhythm with the story, and you find one of my favorite authors was Roger Zelazny, and he's a sort of a science fiction author, but he wrote a little bit about writing all the time as well, the process. And one of the things that what I found evocative of the way he described writing is, once you've driven the car, you've written enough books, you know how to drive a car. You know when to accelerate, you know when to put it into the next gear, and you know how to drive, how to get from where you are to where you want to be. And I think that's very evocative. You in the beginning, like when you're learning to drive a car, you're slow and you're careful and you don't know exactly how to get from here to there. And I think as you go along, practice, like anything, makes perfect. And so, now my process is much more smooth. It's much more regular, than for argument's sake. Certainly with There Is a Reaper, it was very irregular. But the other thing that's come to me over the years is I found that I do not enjoy plotting, and I think plotting. People say, "Are you a plotter or a pantser?" I'm much more of a pantser. Somebody who does things by the seat of their pants. And I work to an outline. I'll put my chapters out there. I'll put up chapter titles. I'll put up character bios. In the beginning, I'll just to refer back to them. I'll write a little backstory, which may never come into the story, and then I'll just go. So let's go.
Yeah, I have to outline things myself. I already know, like the current. I'm working on 2 novels right now, and both of them I know exactly where they're going to go, and I'm halfway through one of them, and third of the way through the other one, but I know where they're going to go, and I write these things down because I have the idea for the story first, from beginning to end, and as I start to outline it, I fill in the bones, and then when I sit down and actually write it, I put the flesh on it. But so where do your story ideas come from? We know There Is a Reaper. We know where that came from, but the novels, the fiction. Where do you get your ideas from?
Well, it's interesting. The most of the long fiction I've written, the long form fiction, novel form, started as a short story. So it will be, like you said, a germ of an idea, something which I can write from beginning to end. So the second thing I wrote, if you will, was The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed, which was a collection of 13 short stories, and those short stories. have acquired, in many cases, a life of their own. One of them was called It's in the Blood. And It's in the Blood turned into, if you will, the prequel novella that became the Blood series. And so the original idea for this sort of mashup, because that's what the character Dev Callion is, he's a mashup of sort of anime and sort of somebody who has a sort of a wise guy kind of attitude about life, and sort of a rebel and sort of an iconoclast, came from that original short story. And then I said, I like this character so much, and I like, what world I've kind of created around this character and what he was doing in that world. I said, let's just go for a novel, and that turned into a very, long, because fantasy, I find that genre likes a long story, and the stories get long, because you have a lot of there's a lot of scene versus just character. You can't just carry a fantasy on dialogue. You have to carry it with a lot of scene and a lot of innovative use of world building and so on, and then working all that in. So but it came out of short stories, which are my first love. I really love the short form more than I love the novel.
Yeah. Yeah, the novels. I mean, you got to be dedicated for the novels. Those take a lot longer. Short stories, I can sit down and in an evening have a short story, the rough draft of it done.
Exactly.
So those come quick.
Some of these anthologies that I've contributed to, and I've contributed to a few of them, you'll say, well, we need a short story. It has to be, give us a deadline. A word count. So let's no more than 8,000 words, at least 1,000. So I'll shoot for something in the middle of that, and I'll just take an idea and go for it. And you can rough it out in a couple of days. You can have a fully kind of fleshed story in a week or two, and then it's something you can look at and say, oh, this is nice, and you polish it up a little bit, and then you submit it. And that's a very satisfying way to write, because you're done. You start and you get through it and you're done. But it's also, I think, difficult, because the short form requires you to have a full story, a beginning, a middle, and end, a plot arc, a character arc, and yet you have to do it in a few thousand words, or no more than like 10,000. And that's, I think it sharpens you. You have to really move through the story and get your point across quickly.
Yeah.
Now, of these more than a dozen books that you have, how many of them are available in audiobook? And, boy, why would you do that?
Yeah, well, I would say the second question is that audiobooks are really a growing marketplace, and people love them for lots of reasons. They're hands-free, if you will. They allow you to put another dimension on the story. And all of them, Stephen, are available in audio. I started with Audible, and the very first one I did, the audiobook, was There Is a Reaper. We found a very lovely man, a producer, who we liked his voice, and we had a lot of talking with him about, because it's a sensitive and it's sometimes a topic which people find a little bit challenging. So his name is Gerald Zimmerman, and he did a wonderful rendition of There's a Reaper. That was the first audiobook, but then every other book I've done, every other story I've done, rather, I released them after publication in audio form.
And are they performing well for you?
They are. I'd say that of all the sort of channels, if you will, for marketing the books and the stories, the audiobooks do the best. They're both they're the most lucrative, and they're also I think the best sellers. And maybe it's because if you write stories which require a little extra bit of characterization, because I try to find producers who will put some life into the story, not just read it in a dull and sort of dry way, and people enjoy them. I like the audiobooks myself, although it's a funny thing. You guys have probably had this same experience. A funny thing is that the voice that your producer will put onto the character is nothing like the one you hear in your head. You're like, that's not his voice, And then you go, well, that's what that person hears in their head when they're reading your story, and it's an interesting insight,
Yeah, definitely. Well, Beam, you want to roll our next commercial here? This one, coincidentally, would be about audiobooks.
Okay.
Multimedia publisher Fresh Ink Group is now producing audiobooks and video books. Publish your book and discover great books by Fresh Ink Group authors, always available in hardcover, softcover, and all ebook formats, and now expanding into audio and video books. Fresh Ink Group. Just wait till you hear what's next.
Yeah, there you go.
Boy, what a coincidence that was loaded up, huh?
What a segue that was. That was lovely.
I'm telling you.
Fairly coincidental.
So, Michael, let's talk about your books now. You've mentioned There Is a Reaper. It's called There Is a Reaper, Losing a Child to Cancer, and that one was inspired by leading up to losing your 7-year-old son. What can you tell us about that?
Well, succinctly, it was, as I mentioned, Christopher really wanted his story told, and we released that book in 2015, which was basically the 20th anniversary of his passing, and it's gone on to really garner a lot of really positive reviews. It's been, really inspiring and comforting to a lot of folks who either have found themselves in similar situations or at least in relatable situations. And we get Margaret and I both get messages about There's a Reaper to this day. Just the other day we got a review from someone who had said that they basically it pulled them out of depression, or out of a depression that they'd been in for almost a year after losing their child. So it's an incredibly rewarding thing to have out there. It was very cathartic. It was very difficult for us to write because we felt and shared very personal things. But people will have come to us and said, we feel like we know you guys. You feel like part of our family, if you will. And so it was. It was, I think, an important thing to do for him and for us.
Yeah.
Is it pretty much just memoir, just telling the story, or do you have information, advice, philosophy, anything, other kinds of things that you incorporated?
I wouldn't say there's philosophy. There certainly it is his story, but it is written in a narrative form. So there's a lot of characters in there. There's a lot of humor in it. People say that they find humor, and they find, and we found even in the actual experience, you even in the darkest of moments, you have to bring your life and the living of it into it. And Christopher's voice is throughout the story, and to the extent that he's in there, people have gotten to know him who would have never had a chance to ever even meet him under any circumstances. So in one way, he's brought into the present day through the agency of this story, but it really is just his story, as I mentioned, from the time he was born to when he passed, and it's acquired a sort of a life of its own, which is we find very, as I said, very rewarding and gratifying.
Yeah, I found it to be very meaningful, very poignant. There was no preachiness in there. You should look at things this way, or you should, have that kind of attitude or whatever. It was just laid it out, tell the story, and let people take it where they want. And I thought it was just a wonderful tribute. And if that was the only thing you ever wrote, that still would have been a tremendous accomplishment.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Stephen. That's high praise indeed. And it was done, as a labor of love, if you will.
Yeah, those are usually the best there. Where your heart is in it. It's not just, I got to write a story, so it's your heart is in it.
So who is the fat man, and why does he get out of bed?
This is a great collection of short stories.
Well, there's a story about the fat man. In essence, I'm the fat man who has to get out of bed. But I don't put myself into it in quite that literal of a form. But the title, was sort of something I just picked out of the air. But there is a titular story. There is the fat man gets out of bed as I think it's near the middle of the book. It doesn't start off with the fat man, but yet. Each one of these stories are in different genre. There's science fiction. There's sort of realistic, life realistic fiction. There's sort of fantastical elements in there. There is always sort of a germ of an idea, something I'm trying to get across, and I really enjoyed, putting together that collection. I sort of set myself to writing a baker's dozen of stories, and I actually thought about writing 16 of them, but I ended up with a baker's dozen because there were a couple that just ended up on the cutting room floor, if you will. And I have to mention, for There's a Reaper, we found a wonderful editor. His name is Barry Shenkoff, and he's from the Chicago School of Editing, so he's a real sort of a classical editor, and he did a wonderful job editing Reaper, and I've used him in every other work since. And so Barry, I have to credit him for keeping me cogent.
Oh. Now, you say you ended up with a baker's dozen. Did you write these with the idea of you're putting it together in a short story collection, or were these written for,
Yes.
Okay. See,
No,
I've got two collections, and both of them were just, I had written so many of these short stories, hey, let's put them in a collection. So
yeah, well, and the other two collections I have are more like that. The Ghost Stories collections and the Angel Stories collections are really because I had a bunch of short stories and I wanted to organize them a little bit better into a form that somebody could buy a whole bunch. Sometimes people don't just like they don't want just one short story. They want a whole cookie box of short stories. Yeah. I literally said The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is going to be a collection of short stories again because I like the short form. I find some of my favorite authors were short story authors, and really were a lot of them short story authors in science fiction and fantasy genres. But I wanted to do all the different genres that I like because I don't have a particular favorite. Maybe science fiction is my most favorite, but I like to write in all kinds of different styles and genre and different voices, different persons.
Now, you had mentioned there's a few that ended up on the cutting room floor. Will you go back and revisit them?
Maybe. I don't know how you guys organize, but I have a laptop, and I just have a folder which I call writing, and there's probably 60 stories in there in various forms of development. The novels get their own kind of research department, and they get their own folder, and there's multiple folders underneath there. But many of these things are really just the beginning. Like I'll write down a few paragraphs or a character definition or something like this. Well, this would be a cool thing to write about, and I'll just put it in there. And I'll go back and I'll look at it and say, well, that was interesting. But it is just. Sometimes it's just a sketch, just a little sketch. So the cutting room floor is the writing folder where things just sit, and I'll go back sometimes for inspiration, or I'll go back and start to pick something. Like you guys have probably had this experience. Somebody says, I have this anthology, I want you to be a contributor, and I need it in a week. And they're like, so I go to the cutting room floor and I search around down there for something that isn't too horrible, and I say, well, I can start with this, at least.
I've done that.
Something. Yeah. It works out.
Mine's a works in progress folder, and it's I get this idea, this would be a cool story, and so I'll start writing it, and I might get 4 or 5 pages into it, and it's going to be a short story, and it's like, okay, I got something this other writing that I want to finish up. And I'll walk away from that. And sometimes before I realize that that was 3 years ago I started that one. Maybe I should look, into finishing that. I got a bunch of those.
Yeah, exactly. But those are good things because as you say, you put 4 or 5, 6, 7 pages into it, or maybe you'll put a chapter or two, and then you can go back to it and refresh yourself. One of my favorite authors says, when I run out of ideas, I go back and I plagiarize myself. You know,
yeah.
and basically he says, well, you know, I'm basically trying to rekindle the old idea from something I wrote maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
Now, over on Twitter, Robert Willis Croft is pointing out, tell him about Fresh Ink Group's music and sound effects. He's our pitch man today. These audiobooks that we're producing, we're putting music bumpers in there, music in the background where appropriate, and sound effects. And he's
nice.
Mr. Willis Croft is very familiar with that because a couple of his books have been submarine stories where we have to fill the audiobook with sound effects from inside a submarine. Something we've become quite familiar with.
That's cool.
Yeah, definitely.
That adds such a beautiful dimension. And I'll say that some of my audiobooks, the producer, particularly for the fantasy, does reverbs and he does special effects as well. And I find it adds a dimension, which, you know, it's again with just the printed word, you have to imagine all that, and it is nice.
Yeah. Okay, we got another commercial. This is for next week's guest, Tammy Trover. And this is about her book, The ABCs of Surviving Cancer.
Cornelius is our cancer fighter. He's here to make our days much brighter. It's his job to help you know you're never alone wherever you go. Cornelius will guide and show you too, so let's fight the fire of cancer in you. A is for alive, that's what I am. This is my story and how it began. When cancer came in and changed my days, changed my thoughts, and changed my ways. Hi everybody, my name is Tammy. And like so many of you around the world, I too am a cancer survivor. I wrote the ABCs of Surviving Cancer, alive, beautiful, and courageous, for people of all ages. My book is fun, informative, and most of all, heartfelt. It's a way to give confidence to young people, as well as families and friends, to educate those who know a young person facing the challenge of cancer, and to bring everybody together with empathy and understanding. This book is beautifully illustrated. The ABCs of Surviving Cancer guides us through the alphabet with a 16-line poem for every letter. Some of the topics include C is for courageous, H for hope, J for joy, O for own it, P for patience, T for truth, V for victory, and Y for you. Join me in this journey of reassurance and understanding, and share it with the people you love. The ABCs of Surviving Cancer is available in hardcover, softcover, and popular ebook editions such as iBook, Kindle, and Nook. Order yours through every major bookseller worldwide, or through my website, tammytrover.com. The ABCs of Surviving Cancer is proudly published by the Fresh Ink Group.
That's next week's guest, Tammy Trover. She'll be on talking about that and a lot of other interesting things. And, of course, like all of these commercials you hear, if you'd like to see the video that goes with it, head on over to the YouTube channel, or rumor has it, you can also find these in all of our websites.
Now, Michael, moving on to another short story collection, A Grave Business, Ghost Stories, collection book number 1. What's this about?
Well, A Grave Business is really just a short story. And the interesting thing, when I titled it a collection, I was saying, well, I'm just going to put out a bunch of short stories, ghost stories, and then you can just read them as you will. So they're really just short stories. But A Grave Business is interesting because it is a sort of a funny, light, set in the future. The story revolves around a family the Burroughs family, who basically has an undertaking business. And the problem with that undertaking business is that dying has gone out of style. And so, well, in fact,
everybody's
it's so
doing
passe
it.
because exactly all people who die in this particular world use this process, which in essence encapsulates their essence in a computer. And so no one actually, all the graveyards have been dug up. They've all been kind of turned into land that people can use because nobody needs them anymore. Well, the Burroughs have the last quote unquote graveyard on Earth, and it turns out that the spirits of the afterlife need graveyards for themselves to have a touchstone back into this world. So that's what the story revolves around, and there's some funny little anecdotes, if you will, and a humorous way that it's all resolved in the end. And we find that the spirits and the technology can work together and actually coexist. And so it was funny. It was it was sort of well received. And again, as an audio book, I found a really good producer for it, and he did a nice job.
Yeah, and it was only 4 months later, after you released The Grave Business, that you launched the Blood series, books 0,
yes.
1, 2, and 3. 4-book series so far.
Yep. Well, and that's the end of it. It's a complete trilogy. Although, as with any story, you always leave a couple of things at the end where if you had to pick it up again, let's say you take the same characters and move that same world into a different conflict and a different storyline, you can do it. So the Blood series is based on the prequel novel. It's in the Blood, and its first book 1, was called Destroyer's Blood. And I picked on this, the theme of blood, and people thought, well, is it a violent book? No, it's really not violent. It just has to do with all the different meanings of blood. Blood being a way of talking about your relations, your relatives, if you will, your family. And this is largely a person in the main character of Dev Kalian, who is a rebel and sort of an iconoclast, who doesn't like his family very much, and his family happens to be, in this case, the gods and goddesses of Olympus, and so it's got a sort of a Greek component, it's got a modern day component, and it's got a sort of an urban fiction and urban fantasy component, if you will, and the mashup part of it is the fact that Dev Kalian, being an iconoclast, has sort of followed. He's kind of patterned himself again after the samurai, and he even though he was born the son of a Titan, he's very much lives the style and the way, the Bushido, the way of the samurai. So I thought it was an interesting mashup between Greek mythology and Japanese sort of anime and mythology, and so that plays out throughout the book. There's sort of tension between those two. And the multiple books, and then the conflict is with the destroyer. The destroyer is actually a person or a personage who we find out later on is a sort of an old nemesis, if you will, of part of his family. And so the novel itself kind of runs through that conflict, but then it engenders another one, and that's where the second book in the series comes out, and we work our way all the way up through to It's Time for Blood. Time for Blood is where we find the ultimate villain, and that was released last November, actually. So it took me about three and a half years altogether to get through that whole novel process. It was quite a slog.
Now,
but then they're all collected into one book, right?
Yeah.
And then, yes, I did an omnibus edition with all 4, with the novella, the prequel novella, as well as all 4 books, Destroyer's Blood, First Blood, and Time for Blood, into The Adventures of Dev Kalian. And the interesting thing about the title, The Adventures of Dev Kalian, is it really is it is his adventures, but the strongest. There are so many strong characters in this series that I would say the female lead, who really comes from the first book, if you will, and also from the prequel novella Betrayer, who is his sword to start with. The female lead becomes, I think, my favorite character of the novels.
Well, it sounds like a good place to wrap it. I mean, you don't want to go to book 5 and bring in Cousin Oliver. Not that very many people would recognize that reference, but
yeah,
we're done with that particular world for now. But like I said, there's always another way you can spin the next conflict.
Yeah. And then you've
Cousin
got another
Oliver.
short story. Cousin Oliver. I'd be curious to see how many people out there got that reference.
Yeah, if you're listening, if you get that reference, listeners, type it in on Twitter. Cousin Oliver.
Yeah. There you go.
You might win a free book. I'll send a free book to somebody who can explain the reference. But Michael, you've got another short story collection, Angel Stories, which sounds a little bit different than the ghostly, dark kind of stuff.
It is. Angel Stories is, there's a number of things that I've written over the years which I would consider sort of, if you will, in the paranormal, supernatural, or sort of, let's say the higher world kind of perspective. And so I found that I had a bunch of them, and I thought, well, let me just pull them all together into a collection called Angel Stories. So as Beam mentioned, these were stories that I had written for other purposes. Some of them were they're republished stories from other collections or from other singular publications, anthologies and so on, who released the book. They released the story after they've had it out for a while, so then you can do what you will with it. You retain the rights. So that's where Angel Stories comes from. And I like some of those stories in particular. One of them is actually a continuation of us after there is a Reaper, and so it's again sort of a true story, a narrative nonfiction that we threw in there as well. And there's another one that was dedicated to my father called My Father's Hands, and these are sort of personal stories that are written in a non. It isn't overtly saying, well, this is me, but people who know me or know my family would know that this is a story about us. But yet it becomes a narrative nonfiction that I just don't say to anybody. Say, well, here's a story, and I think it's written in a way that's approachable, even if you have no idea who any of these people are.
Okay, I want to drop this in here, listeners. If you would like to talk to tonight's guest, you still have some time. Just dial 516-453-9902. That's 516-453-9902, and we'll take your call. Or if you want to just throw out a comment on or a question on Twitter, just put in hashtag Fresh Ink Group in your tweet, and we'll see it. So if you understand that Cousin Oliver reference, hashtag Fresh Ink Group in your tweet and let us know.
There you go.
So, Michael, you've got stories in several anthologies too: ghostly rights, ghostly romance. I'm sensing a theme here.
Well, I got into writing the ghost stories basically because of ghostly rights. A person who I knew, Claire Plaisted is her name, and she actually lives now in New Zealand. But when I first was introduced to her, she lived in the UK. But she's a native New Zealander, so she went back home, if you will. And she's been publishing these ghostly rights anthologies for a number of years. So I forget who introduced me to her, but I thought, well, that's fun. I like ghost stories, so I'll try my hand at writing some ghost stories for the anthology. So a lot of the stories in November Tales, some of the stories in November Tales, for argument's sake, were from the efforts that I did for the anthology, and I also published some of them separately as separate works. I do like ghost stories. I find not just macabre, but sort of the dealing with the supernatural and dealing with the paranormal. First of all, I like stories like that. Some of them, and I don't make them too gory or in any way. They usually have a bit of a lighter touch than that. But I do like that genre. So I do have a number of ghost stories out there, and I like them.
Yeah. So then from ghostly to cozy, you're writing a murder mystery now for your mom?
Well, that's the latest thing. That's the work in progress, if you will. So I've been working on this since last May, kind of through the summer, if you will. And so from nothing to we're at around 45 or so thousand words, and I'm targeting something around 60 or 65,000. So it's going to be a novel length, but most of the fantasy works were upwards of 110, 120,000 words, so much, twice as large, if you will. And so this is, this particular genre is murder mystery, but it's not the gory kind of dark, sort of. Some people write these murder mysteries where everybody's being stabbed every 10 seconds. It's not like that. So I guess closer to the cozy genre, but I'm trying to get some nice, strong characters. I like the folks who I've put into the lead role, and the crystal part of it, the cozy crystal part of it, is this is just a little backstory. My wife ran a rock and gem store for 10 or 12 years, and she loves crystals. And so I'm pulling in some of that because I worked in the store with her all the time, so I learned a lot about crystals myself and about gems and minerals. And I'm pulling some of that in. I'm pulling in some of the some of the stuff that my mom was looking for because she likes mysteries. So that's what this effort is about. And we'll see how it comes out. It is a new genre for me, although I did as a young person like reading like the Hardy Boys and Agatha Christie and Sherlock Holmes and those kinds of. And I would say that those kinds of mysteries, detective and murder mystery novels are in the background of this one too, as far as inspirations.
Well, let's hope she likes it, because I hear Mom can be a brutal critic.
Mom is definitely a good critic. She's I always let her read whatever I've written before it's published, because she has a good take on things, being an English major, and she writes a lot too, and never publish. I try to encourage her to publish things, but she doesn't want to publish anything. But she's a good writer as well. So yeah, Mom definitely get a chance to critique this before it goes to press.
So how do you publish? You self-publish? You work with publishers? All of the above?
I've done both. My editor, the novel, the narrative nonfiction, There's a Reaper, was published by Barry Shankoff. He had a little publishing house which published the novel, and that was also where we went and had the Fat Man published. So those two were both done through Barry's publishing house. But then since that time, since I figured out the ropes, I have done all the other things that I've done as self-published works. I use Draft to Digital for formatting, and they do a really wonderful job. And then I'll publish it. I always publish wide. I don't pick Amazon or do any of their what do they call it? You're tied into Amazon's publishing, Kindle Select or Direct or whatever the heck they call it. I don't do that, but I publish as a Kindle, as Kindle work, as well as paperback and audiobook. Nothing in hardcover, because I don't think for what I do that the return on investment is there. But everything in either soft cover or ebook.
So where do you get your covers?
The covers are interesting. Almost all the covers that I've done for the early stuff, for Christopher's book and for the Fat Man, I found a very good cover artist. Her name is Samantha McLaughlin. And she's actually a friend of one of my sons, and she's a very good artist. But then the layout for those two books was done by the publisher, so the fonts and all were selected. And then since that time, everything else again, the covers, I'll either design them myself. I think I've designed almost all the covers of everything since that time, and then picking the fonts, picking the the cover, the picture placement, and so on. A lot of those pictures are either I took the pictures myself, or they're I'll license a picture, I'll license a cover picture, and I think they're not too bad. I'm not a terrific cover designer, but I'm not the worst one ever either.
Now you and your wife, you do a radio show as well. So what's this all about?
Well, that's we've been doing a radio show for about 4 years now. It's called The Soul of the Everyman, and it actually was serendipitous. I'd had a one of these again, sort of an author show interview with a gentleman by the name of Scott, who was the host that evening, and he worked for a place called Artist First Radio. Artist First Radio does bands, and they do authors, and they do talk shows. They have all kinds of shows on that particular radio station. It's live, it's broadcast live, and then it's archived. So it's similar to what you're doing with FIG in some respects. Different. Everyone has their own spin on it. So after that interview, he said, "Would you like to do your own radio show?" I'm like, "Well, I thought to myself, well, no, not really," because it's just I had no idea how if I could fill even 10 minutes of time. But yet, we sat down, talked about it, talked to Margaret about it. Said, "Do you want to do a radio show? Because I want to do it with you. I don't want to just sit there and do a monologue diatribe kind of thing, because I don't think those are well. I wanted to have a conversation." And so what we crafted this about was basically when we were working in the Rock and Jam together, Margaret and I would talk to each other all the time about whatever, and people would come in and we'd have conversations. And what we always noticed is that everyone else in the store would stop and listen to us talking about whatever we were talking about to whomever we were talking about it to. And so we said, well, let's just have a conversation between you and I about whomever. Either we'll have a guest or it'll just be you and I talking about a particular topic. So that's what the show became. We pick a topic and we talk about it for an hour. And it's been very well received. We have a lot of listeners, and a lot of people listen to the show, afterwards, as you guys were mentioning about, in the archives. And so now on Artist First, if you go to our website, our Artist First page, we have, 4 years worth of weekly shows, hours long, so an hour long each time. So we have this ridiculous number of hours. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of us talking on the radio. It's really kind of ridiculous, but we enjoy it.
So what's this?
And people,
where's this website at?
Oh,
web
I
address?
should have probably given it. But it's give me a second. I'll just give it to you exactly, since I'm sitting right in front of the computer. It's Artist First, without any S, so it's ARTISTFIRST, no space.com, /Lyons, which is my name, LYNES, .htm. So you just type that in and you can come to the page. We have some of my books there, and then we have all the shows, and it just goes on and on and on. But they're also on YouTube. We have them all posted on YouTube and on Rumble and a couple other of these venues, where you can do videos, but they're really just audio shows with a picture, that we are talking to, and the picture is usually a picture of the topic, if you will, a picture that is sort of encapsulates the topic, a quote or whatever it is that we happen to be talking about for that show, and they've been very well received. We've had a lot of fun with it.
All right, cool. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, they're fun. Stephen, you said philosophy in the first. These are philosophical. A lot of these are philosophical.
Okay. So speaking of philosophy, do you have any advice for authors out there in the audience?
Well, I would say, or musicians. Well, I have no talent in music whatsoever, so I wouldn't presume. But certainly for authors, I would say the main thing is keep writing, and they always say write about what you know, and I would say write about what you like. I've learned a lot. When you start researching for a story, you should do you do a little research and you learn something about the environs, about the character, about yourself, And so part of writing is also the researching part. I'm not a huge researcher, but I do enjoy learning. Like, I learned a lot about Japanese culture. And I wrote another different short story that was based on Japanese culture, just because I had done so much research for it for the Blood series. So it's fun.
Yeah, Japanese culture. Ron Yates, one of our previous guests, he spent a lot of time over there, and he's got a lot of interesting stories, with that culture over there.
I know Ron. I met him years ago too. Yeah, I know Ron Yates. I've spoken to him a couple, 3 times. He's a very interesting character.
Yeah. Now, how can people contact you? How can they find you? Social media, blog, website, Instagram,
sure,
Facebook, Twitter.
Yeah, we're on all those. My handle in almost everything is Wood Heat, because we do heat our house with wood. So that's where that comes from. So it's called Wood Heat, and so on Instagram, it's I think Wood Heat was taken, so it's called Wood Heat Angel. On Twitter, it's Wood Heat, and on I don't know, what else am I on? But Wood Heat is the handle, and I do have a website which we host on. Let's see, it's on Wix. So it's MikeLyons.wixsite.com, M. Lyons author, and we have all the books there, as well as links to all the other, the radio show and the short stories. And it just, so you guys know, the social media can just consume your life. I've actually backed away quite a bit from it over the last couple of years because it was just too much. I wasn't getting anything else done.
Yeah,
so I
feel you there.
I would say that the social media. Right, so I wouldn't say the social media is up to date, but people certainly can get to us there, there as well on the websites and on social media.
This is why we hired a guy to do it for us there at Fresh Ink. He's a whiz out there. He gets out there and just because you get bogged down in doing that, you don't have time to do anything else. Yeah,
is that Samuel? I think I interacted with him a little bit.
Yeah,
he's a very nice fellow.
Yeah, and the thing is you and your son work on the German autos. He's big into Sam is big into, what is it, Volvo, Stephen?
Volvo, yeah.
Yeah.
And somebody just gave him
things.
A Honda with 400,000 miles on it that he's restoring too.
Oh, there you go.
And he rolls up his sleeves and gets into it,
Yeah, well, we have that in common then too. I had a brief, email exchange with Sam when I think I was handing him an excerpt and a bio and things, that sort of stuff. He seems like a very nice kid.
Yeah.
Well, it's been fun having you on the show, Michael. It's been a long time since we've talked, and I'm glad that we got to talk about your books and hear about your radio show and all this kind of stuff. We'd like to invite you to join us on future podcasts. We'd like to have you back again as a guest someday, but feel free to listen in, call in, harass our other guests in future weeks too. And that's true of all of you guests on the Voice of Indie podcast. You're encouraged to keep coming back, participate, spread the word, and get things out there. We've also got. Go ahead.
It's been my pleasure. It's been fun.
Yeah. We have a cover for Whoopi Likes Her Bacon Crispy now, so everybody look real quick. I'm going to hold it up. This is the cover reveal. Is that cool or what? Oh, you can't see it? Well, maybe it'll be in next week's newsletter. And if you want to make sure you see that, get to freshinkgroup.com, and down near the bottom of the home page, fill out the little form so that you can get on our mailing list, learn about these podcasts, see things like the sample of Michael Lyons' work that was in today's newsletter.
Yeah, of course. And then you'll also find out who next week's guest is. That's Tammy Troverd, the author of The ABCs of Surviving Cancer. Alive, Beautiful, and Courageous, with Cornelius, the Cancer-Fighting Crocodile. This is a beautifully illustrated book for family, children, friends, and neighbors. And Tammy will be on the air talking about her journey. And it'll be your opportunity to call her up and share your own stories, or if you have questions for her. So give her a call and tune in next week.
Yep. Now, the week after that, I'm going to be in Michigan for a couple of days and then over to Chicago, and I'm bringing Mr. Weeks, our co-host, back to Alabama this time. So we're traveling on Wednesday, which means that we're going to do a short little quick bumper show and replay the interview that we did with each other about 7 or 8 months ago. So 2 weeks from now, it'll be mostly rerun, so we won't be taking live calls or monitoring Twitter during the show, but we encourage you to check in and learn a little bit about your co-hosts and their books. And then after that,
the following week is author Patty Wiseman. Patty is a multi-genre author. She's written, I believe, children's books. She's written romance and mystery, and she's got quite a few books out there. So if you want to get to know a little bit about her before that episode, go over to Amazon or go over to freshinkgroup.com, and under the members page, you'll find Patty Wiseman, and go take a look and see what she's all about, and then tune in.
So thanks again to everybody for participating, and especially Michael Lyons, extraordinary author. We appreciate you being on the show, Michael.
Thanks for joining us,
Thank you
Michael.
very much, guys. It was fun.
All right, thanks.
And
we'll see everybody next week.
All right, everybody. And remember, check out the show in the archive and help us get those numbers bouncing. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
You've been a part of Voice of Indie, a production of Fresh Ink Group. Spread the word, support our guests, then find us at freshinkgroup.com and be sure to hashtag Fresh Ink Group.